Well, good morning, guys. This is going to be the first of a series of gunsmithing stuff. Now, I kind of made mention of this before, and this is kind of my rebuttal to a lot of the stuff that I see about how glamorous and glorious gunsmithing can be, both from some brick and mortar teaching organizations to some fully accredited online gunsmithing courses, and just some accredited online gunsmithing courses where you're going to be buying videos for different things and stuff like that. So I'm giving you my perspective. As I do this series, this is going to be kind of the kickoff, and I'm going to basically tell you, you don't want to become a gunsmith. You know, that's kind of a harsh thing to be telling you, especially since you've looked at all the pros of this, and I'm just giving you my perspective. Now, I've done this for 30 plus years now. I started out, playing with guns when I was really young. I was playing with handguns pretty extensively by the time I was 21 or 22, and I'd already been playing with rifles and shotguns quite a bit before that, both hunting and working on my own stuff and just doing that kind of thing. I shot competitively from, the time I was 20 or 21 up until, mid 30s, early 40s, and I'm retired now. So I closed my shop, and I've operated as a professional gunsmith for about 30 years. A little more than that, and I've done a few other things along the way as my kids were growing up, and we had to actually clothe them and feed them and things like that. So there was other things that came along that distracted me off and on throughout those years, but primarily I've always been involved in the gun industry since I've actually been involved in the industry itself since before I was 30. My late 20s, mid-late 20s. So anyway, this is my perspective. This is my opinions. And I'm going to kind of give you my spiel of it. I don't know how long this is going to go on. I've got a list of stuff that I'm going to kind of go over. And, everybody's going to have their opinion. There are little niche things out there in the gunsmithing world that will always be needed and will always be, a lot of people will be able to put themselves in those positions, but it's not quite as easy or as glamorous as everybody thinks it is. So, and you can't ignore the political climate and the educational climate that goes on in accredited colleges or mainline colleges. So I'm not going to get into those, but we all know what position we're in here now in 2023, and you need to take that into consideration as we go along. Now, I see, and I've seen a couple of online courses that are being offered, both fully accredited college courses where you can get your AA out of it, and then just online courses that are going to say that you're certified. So they're going to send you a certificate. Now, you will find most old-time gunsmiths that have been around for a long time are kind of crotchety, and I'm probably one of those. I've what's actually prompted all of this is now that I am retired, I have time and maybe the resources to be working on a few of my own projects that have been sitting on the shelf, in the safe, whatever, for years, basically. Because when you become a gunsmith, if you intend to make a living at that, why, most generally, you're no longer a hunter. You're not as much of a shooter as you used to be, although you can use both of those venues to advance your career to a certain degree. But you'll find that the advantages that you gain from trying to do both of those do not pay for the justification of the time and the money spent doing those. So what you need to realize, and I'm doing this from a general gunsmith's perspective because that's what I've, for the most part, always done. You will find if you actually want to eat and be able to pay your bills to a certain degree, the times when you are the busiest and when there's the most demand for you is during hunting season, during major competitions or trap shooting competitions in my local area. I've been very involved with the trap shooting community for several years. And so you are no longer a shooter for those types of things. You're no longer a hunter because you need to be in your shop making money to pay your bills. So anyway, that's there again. I kind of ramble on, and that's what this video will be. Like I say, I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't know what it's going to contain. We're just going to go along, and I'm going to give you my thoughts and kind of go over my list in no particular order. Now, the advantages of being a gunsmith: you get to work on guns. We all, if we're involved with the guns, we love our guns, and what could be better than doing what you just absolutely love? Well, that's all well and fine to a certain degree, but since I've been working on some of my own projects, I didn't finish that little spiel. I've been watching quite a few YouTube videos on doing this, doing that, just to see what's out there and see how people do things differently than I do them. And there's a lot of that goes on. So consequently, once you start watching some of those, why YouTube feeds you more and more. And they've been feeding me an awful lot of reloading information, reloading content, gunsmithing content, gun school content to become this great gunsmith that you all aspire to become. The old-time guys, like I say, like me probably, will turn our nose up at a lot of these things that are being offered because we've seen individuals that have come out from these courses and are looking for work. We've seen the knowledge that they have at that point in their lives when they're coming out to set the world afire with everything they know and everything they're going to do in the world. So the expectations that we as older gunsmiths have are not being met by these individuals that come out, because very often they're young men or women who have gone through these courses and they know a lot of what they think they need to know. When I started out 30 plus years ago, I started out at a indoor range, a very large facility. I think we had, well, I know we had 3 bays. I think there was 12 lanes in that. We had full line gunsmithing. There was full retail shop for both firearms and archery and fishing. And although the fishing had kind of gone away by the time I really became involved in that shop. And indoor archery range, which at that time was state of the art. The firearms range was Caswell products, steel backstop system, target returns, all the good stuff that we see. And the archery was one of the projected archery ranges where we shot into a canvas backstop with blunt tipped arrows, and our targets, games, whatever was being done at that point in time was projected out onto that screen. So state of the art at that time. Really good facility. It is no longer here because ultimately the owner of that range did not take care of his people. That should have still been a growing concern 30 years later, but nonetheless. So when I went to work there, I'd been working with guns for 10 years already on my own and a few of my friends' things, stuff like that. It took me about a week to realize that the owner absolutely knew nothing. He was a parts changer, and he'd been to a brick and mortar gunsmithing school. He was a parts changer, quite literally. There were a couple other shops in the area, and I was fortunate enough to, in one of those shops, to be able to learn a little bit, which is really kind of surprising when I speak about the beginning of that. It took me about a week to realize that the owner of this shop did not know anything. It took me about another week. Well, it took me a week to realize I didn't know anything. And it took me about another week to realize that he knew really no more than I did. So I started learning, and that's the way I become a gunsmith. Now, I have been able to work in a couple of other shops that had old-time gunsmiths in them. I learned quite a bit. Part of it was how I didn't want to do things, but I did learn a lot from this one particular shop. So anyway, nonetheless, pros and cons. Like I say, you get to work on guns. What could be better than that? And that's really great when everything works the way it's supposed to. Now, you got options, and what a lot of these gunsmithing schools that are going to set you straight are going to tell you that you can go and work in a local gun shop, and you can learn a lot from them, because you never stop learning, and you do not ever stop learning. But you're going to be able to go and work in a local shop and learn everything there is to know. No, you're not. You're not. You can probably go to work as a salesman behind the counter, sell guns. You're going to learn something about guns along the way. You may very well be able to develop that into mounting scopes and things like that. Chances are that is not a long-term situation. If you are in a shop like that is actually a full-line gunsmithing shop along with the sales people, the gunsmiths that are there, they may teach you some stuff, but they're not going to give away all their secrets. They're not going to put themselves or their job in jeopardy by teaching you everything they know. So while that may be an advancement, that may be, you may pick up some information there, but you started off as a salesman, you're working for minimum wage. And when I look at, there's one, I'm not going to mention any of these gunsmithing schools, you can figure out who they are. There's a few of them around, and in reality, the brick and mortar learning institutions that teach gunsmithing, in reality, in a 18-month, 2-year course, I personally don't feel you're going to get that much more than you're going to get from a online course, whether it's a accredited college course or if it's just a certificate. There's not enough time there for you to really learn anything that's going to long-term advance you in the gunsmithing industry. That sounds blunt, and that may not be 100% true, but that's the reality of it. You're not going to be able to amass enough information in that classroom setting. Even though you may have some hands-on, you're not going to have nearly enough hands-on to be able to really advance yourself. So when I hear of the online courses that are, and I've heard some numbers, I heard for an 18-month, 2-year course, I heard $16,000. So in reality, you're going to go to gunsmithing school, you're going to come out, and you're going to go to work for minimum wage, basically, in a gun shop that's going to, you're going to be a salesman. And like I say, there's exceptions to that. This is my opinion. But the reality is what you're going to be faced with is, if you come out of gunsmithing school and if you are advancing, you've got basically 2 routes to go. Well, there's more than that, but you're basically 2 or 3 routes to go. One is you're going to go to work in an established shop, and you're not going to be getting top dollar. It's going to be a learning experience, but in my experience, what I've seen is when you start out that way, you're not at that particular job that long if your aspirations are to advance in the gunsmithing world. So you will either move on to some other shop, do something else, go to I saw someone was saying that there was this one accredited university, I guess, did put out some job postings as they became available, but they didn't have any real tie-ins to place you in the gunsmithing world. A couple of the things that this individual had said that he saw was there was a listing from a gun manufacturer they were hiring people to either do test firing or for assembly. So that's still a minimum wage job where you're going to relocate to whatever that place is, and you're either going to be, yes, you're going to be fitting parts, but you're doing one job repetitiously as they put out a line of guns, or you're going to go out there and you're going to stand and test fire that gun. And I will tell you that after standing there for 4, 5, 6 hours a day, just test firing stuff, not all that fun, not really where you want to be. So your other options are you're going to go into a shop that is an established shop where you're going to work for minimum wage, or you're going to go out on your own. So I guess we should start at the beginning. You need an FFL. Now, in the gun world, we'll see guys come and go, and I've watched them over the years. They'll start out, we'll say, Cerakoting their own guns. Pretty soon they've done a couple of theirs, and they've done a couple for their buddies. And then pretty soon they've gone and word gets out that they can do this. Well, you've already got to have an FFL, because if you don't have an FFL and you're going to do that, the feds are going to find you. The gun communities in most areas are a relatively tight community where everybody knows what everybody else is doing. There's no real secrets. So pretty soon after Fred's done his gun, and he does one for his best friend Joe, and then pretty soon Nick over here finds out that, well, Fred's doing these, maybe he'll do one for me. So Fred will do one for Joe over here, and then there's 3 or 4 more guys, and Fred's thinking, I can make a pretty good living doing this. I can make a lot of money doing this in my spare time because this is what I want to do. Well, if he hasn't gotten an FFL, pretty soon he's on the radar of the federal government, because guess what? You have to have an FFL because people talk. Even if Fred's told Joe, don't say anything about this because this is just we're just doing this among friends type of thing. People talk about work that they like or work that they don't like. So you got to have an FFL. Now, what you want to bear in mind is right now in this climate, the feds don't want you. They're going out of their way to put out federal firearms license holders. And this is not, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. No. The word out right now, and down the road this may or may not change. Are you going to invest $15,000, $16,000, $20,000 in education for a career that you're not going to be able to pursue? Now, so you think, well, I don't need an FFL if I just work for little mom and pop gun shop over here or this gun repair facility, and I can always go someplace else down the road. I'll learn a little bit more, maybe things will change and I'll be able to get my license and do all that stuff. Well, when you go to work for little mom and pop gun shop down here that is a full line gunsmith, if you're going to work as a gunsmith, one of the things that you're very probably going to be presented with as you fill out your paperwork for your taxes and all the other stuff that you're going to fill out when you get that job, one of those things is very probably going to be a no competition clause. And what those usually will tell you is that if things don't work out here, if you leave us, why, you're not going down the road, 3 blocks or a mile or 10 miles, and you're going to open your own shop because you just agreed not to compete with us for usually at least a year. So what are you going to do in that year's time when you can't make a living because you've quit or gotten fired from your job, and you got no place to go? So there's that. Now, not only are you dealing with the feds, you're dealing with the state, you're dealing with the city or the county or both or all three, probably all three. None of those really want you there. So you're going to do this out of your house. Well, no, you're not. They're pretty much doing away with FFLs out of your houses. So you pretty much have to have a brick and mortar location. So let's see, golly, that's kind of an extra expense. I'm going to have to lease, rent, buy a building. But you're probably not buying it because you just came out of gunsmithing school and you don't have a pot to. So chances are you're going to lease a retail space, an industrial space, whatever the case may be, for whatever that cost may be. So not only do you have a payment going out for your lease, your rent, whatever the case may be, you got all the utilities that go along with it. You have, let's see, how are you zoned? Even though that may be an industrial location, are you zoned okay in the city? Because most cities really don't want you. If you hadn't noticed, a lot of places are not firearms friendly right now. So let's see, where are we going? And you're going to have to insure that space. And yeah, you just need renter's insurance, but you need liability insurance. So what are you going to do about liability insurance? That's going to cost you, I haven't checked policy costs recently. The minimum you're going to spend is, well, I don't know, I'm not even going to quote figures, but you're going to spend a minimum on liability insurance. Now, you're going to have firearms on premises to repair them. So as you're storing those firearms, how are you storing them? What is your secure location? How many safes do you have? What do you have a secure room that is actually a secure room? Are they being locked away? What about damage from fire and, theft, things like that? So what are you going to spend for insurance on that? And it doesn't take too long if we're going to be really, really kind and say a firearm's worth $500. That's the very minimum, $1,000 a piece. And, I think probably the most that I've had in storage when I was operating was probably about 95 firearms. So you figure those, and they're not all going to be worth $1,000 a piece, but you're going to have, a couple $100,000 in liability insurance, I would say at least, $250,000. Now, when I was operating, and when we had the Cabela's store come in several years ago, they approached me about doing their work, and ultimately I did their work for about 3 years. And I was carrying insurance anyway to cover that. The reality was it was a very inexpensive policy by comparison to what it was. The last year that I did when I went to redo my agreement with them and Cabela's story is the story that I got was I was the last independent gunsmith that was doing work for Cabela's at that time. And that's before they were bought out by Bass Pro Shops, a few years before that. But I was the last one. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't 100% know, but that's what I was told. So, and all of their work went to a large firearms repair facility in the Midwest. Now, I know who that is. So I don't know what happened if Cabela's decided that they wanted all of their eggs in that one basket and didn't want to deal with little bitty me, or if this large repair facility says, you know what, we want all of your work to keep it at this cost point. I don't know which way it went, but I talked to my insurance guy and he kind of agreed. But what they came out with was I needed to have I believe it was $5 million liability policy at that time, which was quite larger than what I had. And that is the point where your liability insurance goes from a little podunk insurance policy that anybody can get. It goes into a full-blown industrial policy or business policy, and the cost of that policy was about 5 times more than what I was currently paying per year. So I talked to the insurance agent, and I went back to Cabela's, and we discussed it and everything, but the insurance agent says usually when they do that, why, they're trying to push you out. So that was when I no longer worked for Cabela's. So you're going to have to carry liability insurance one way or the other. What do you want to do? Are you going to do general gunsmithing, where you're going to see a whole lot of everything? Are you going to reblue? And I'll use rebluing as an example. I still run tanks for my own use. For a lot of the machine tool parts I build, I run them through bluing tanks. I think it gives a very nice finish, and I utilize that. And I have dealt with all of the downfalls of having a set of bluing tanks. Now, that brings up the next question of how are you dealing with bluing system stuff, or waste chemicals, hazardous drag out from the bluing tanks. Suddenly you're dealing with the EPA. From what I understand, they're not really a fun agency either. So you're going to deal with them. Are people going to trust you with their stuff? Yep, little Fred, he opened up his shop down here last month, and am I going to take him to Little Fred, or am I going to drive the 25 to see Joe that I've dealt with for years? So it's a pretty, I paint a pretty bleak outlook, and I don't know that I'm not trying to be negative, but I'm trying to give you the realities of what I see. Now, books. What do I need for books? I'm always learning. What do I need? You need all of them. And you say, well, I can find exploded views for firearms online. Yeah, some of them you can. But there's a whole lot of material out there that you're not going to find online. And I've amassed quite a bit of it. And I don't say it to say, oh yeah, I've got all this and I've got these tools and that tools or something else. These are the things that you need if you're going to successfully operate. You're going to turn things in a timely manner. I started out early on, I was going to specialize in 1911 guns. 1911s are the platform that I've competed with for years and years. It's a platform that I'm very, very familiar with, and I really like it. The problem is, you're not making a living on 1911s for the most part. Everybody thinks they can be a 1911 gunsmith, and everybody will do it cheaper, faster, better, or at least say they can than you are. So that's a kind of a flooded market anyway, and not real popular. The idea that you're going to become a general gunsmith and you're going to have all this knowledge about older guns and you're going to deal with all the newer guns and everything. No, you're really not. Because this is one of the most tool-intensive things that I have ever seen. There is a specialized tool for almost everything, and when we get to my workbench and doing some of that stuff, we'll be able to look at some of the specialized tools that go along with it. And no, you don't have to have all of them, but you kind of do, you know. And I don't have nearly the tools that I would like to have or that I need to have, even in retirement here. A tremendous amount of tools I've built myself over the years, and you know, I've seen a lot of there again, back to what's offered in some of these gunsmithing courses, some of these kids that are taking these courses, and a lot of them are out of the military, and they're using their GI Bill to pay for it and everything. My best advice, if you want to become a gunsmith ultimately, is take your learning experience, your GI Bill, your whatever, or even your hard-earned money if you want to do this, go and become a machinist, because then you have a skill that you can utilize outside of the gun world. So it may not be what you ultimately want to do, but it will be something that will pay the bills for the most part until you can establish yourself or do what you really want to do in life. Everybody needs to follow their bliss. They need to do what they think is best for them, but you better pick something that you can make a living at. You know, the idea that you're going to make your master's in college for something like art appreciation or something, that's about the same thing. You're just about as employable when you go to work to be as a gunsmith. What else do I have on my list here? Tools, parts, materials. Like I said, everything is specialized. You know, and you see these, I'm seeing this online gunsmithing school, and a lot of gun channels are promoting this school because this school is sponsoring their channels. So everybody is out here to make money. You know, everything that's produced in the gun world or in the gun industry, all the fancy new widgets for your gun, all the new guns, there's something that's all the new cartridges. Those are something new to sell you something new. For the most part, it's rehashed stuff that's not really all that new when you look back in time. Parts. Parts are another one. Parts are harder and harder to come by. Over the weekend, I was working on one of my projects, a little Colt double action that needed some stuff along the way. I'd picked it up and I knew it needed some stuff. It's been sitting in my safe for years and years. One of the things it needed was initially, the initial diagnosis before it was disassembled or anything is the hammer spur was broken off of this gun. And this is a relatively high-end gun. It's got some value to it. And I found a hammer for it. So there was actually I had a hammer for it, but I also found another one. I found a new one. That was about an $80 investment. So as I tore this down, and I was going to shoot video of doing this, and I had problems with it. I videoed it with the idea that it was one of the things that you would see coming across your bench occasionally. Once I got to looking at it, the hammer was damaged, or the trigger was damaged. So I needed a replacement trigger. There's no triggers out there. None. So I've been searching for a trigger for this gun for quite some time. And I finally found a used one. Found a used one on one of our little websites. In the door, that was just under $100 there for a used one. And I saw pictures of it. I was not sure. I felt like it could be a viable trigger. Looked pretty good. Once it rolled in the door, there was some abuse to that trigger. And there was really some question of if after this, well, by now I've got a couple other parts in it, and I've got a couple $100 invested in this repair, and I've already got money invested in the firearm itself. So I was not sure if I was going to be able to repair it with the parts that I had. And Ultimately, I did, and it took some recutting of both the hammer and the trigger, and it was done on a couple of specialized tooling jigs. I had tooling for it, about $500 worth of tooling to accurately recut the engagements on this gun. And you're going to say, well, no, you didn't have to have that. You couldn't. Yeah, you almost did. It may have been able to be done without, but it probably did need to have that much done. So, like I say, I don't mean to really be down on this. Another thing is I've run into a couple of examples that come to mind. If we look at a Smith & Wesson MP22, fun little 22, neat little gun, basically the same system. I will compare them to a 1022. And the only reason I compare those two together is a 1022 is a rugged little gun. Guys have been noted to one of the we'll call them a failure point, although it's not really a failure point on the 1022, is guys will shoot them so long, so hard without cleaning them, they will get so grungy and dirty inside that ultimately they will blow an extractor out. So you lose the extractor, you lose the extractor plunger, and you lose the extractor spring. This is not a big deal. $15, $18, in parts. And I've always kept those parts in stock, so if somebody walks in and says, oh, my 1022 won't work. Well, clean it up, put those in there, and you're good to go again. The little Smith & Wesson MP22 will do the same thing. It's the same cause. There's no other issues with it. The manufacturers don't really want you out here either for the most part, because, golly, guess what? At the time that I saw the last one, oh, we won't sell you those extractors. That's a factory control part, and you have to ship the gun back to us. Well, the individual can ship the gun back to the manufacturer. The manufacturer can ship it directly back to the customer. The only problem is you've got shipping going both ways. You've got Smith & Wesson's selling you the parts and selling you the installation, because it's not our fault. That's just the way we did it. Now, I've also run into things from manufacturers for on newer production stuff, newer production 22s. The same model of gun, I've always been able to order firing pins from a distributor, drop more of the manufacturer, drop them in, no problem. Now, the climate in the gun industry, in the political era, has made it to the point where, no, we won't sell you that firing pin, the same firing pin that I've been fitting for 10 years on a gun that's still produced, same design, same firing pin. We won't sell you that firing pin. You have to ship the gun back to us. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the manufacturer wants that business. They want to have the revenue from selling and fitting that part. The other reason is liability. They're not going to open them up to liability for someone to do that. So I paint a pretty bleak picture here. I see a lot of companies offering information for gunsmithing school, and they make it sound pretty rosy. You're going to know what you need to know to get started and everything. We're going to provide you with the tools. Well, they're going to provide you. Last time I saw from somebody showing a course here just the other day was I saw a set of gray screwdrivers, which is 6 or 8 flat ground screwdrivers, and you do need the specialized screwdrivers for them. I saw a set of brass punches and another set of punches. I've heard it depends on the course you get, what tools you get, what things you do, how, what's provided in those courses for you. When I look at my bench, I've got a set of Brownells screwdrivers, the solid screwdrivers. I think there's 24 of them in a set. I've got 2 complete sets, and on the bench is 1 set plus a couple others and some other specialized screwdrivers and things like that. Right on that bench, I've got at least another complete set and a whole bunch of extras that have been used for specialized things. One of the reasons I have another complete set is I had a little satellite shop for a while, and it was another set was set up on that bench. But the idea that you're getting these things provided for you, you're not getting the best value for your money. There's other ways to get that knowledge that's going to get you the same place you're going to be. it's not an easy path. This gunsmithing thing is something, like I say, everybody's enamored by it being a gunsmith. You're going to run into things just like I ran into on this little Colt revolver, and I'm relatively experienced with a little Colt revolver. I ran into problems with it. I ended up with, I probably got a total of 12 or 14 hours in that little revolver and $200 worth of parts. Now, if you're trying to do that same work for somebody that walked in and says, "Oh, I just need this," you're not going to make a whole lot of money there. So you need to be taking that in perspective. Everything's not a bowl of cherries. I'm seeing guys, like I say, if you go to work just working at a gun counter for somebody before you even think about trying to become a gunsmith, or spending money on courses, whether they're online or whether they're from a brick and mortar school, you might learn how to mount a scope the way that shop wants scopes mounted, or the way that shop mounts scopes. I see so many different things, and guys saying that they know the proper way to mount a scope. And I've got a video out there saying the proper way to mount sling swivels, and I've gotten a whole lot of ridicule for that on one reason or another. And a lot of that stuff I just delete out, because I do know the proper way to do that. But I've seen some stuff where watched a guy that gave his resume about how he'd been in the military and doing long range stuff and setting up guns and mounted hundreds of scopes and on and on and on. And I watched him give his spiel for about 4 different scope mounting tools that kind of go in the system that he uses, and he gave links on his website so that you could buy those from him. And then as he's mounting a scope up, and he says, well, the torque value of this should be 17 inch-pounds for these scope rings. And he's got his little kit there that he's opened up, that he's already promoted for you to buy. And he says, well, this has only got a 15-pound torque limiter in it. And he clicks it to that 15 pound. And he says, so then we just take this one and I give it about 2 more inch-pounds. I just give it about 2 more inch-pounds. How is this calibrated? If you're so advanced, you're selling a set of tools that this has to be torqued to this specification, and then you're torquing it by hand, who the heck are you? So anyway, I don't paint a very good picture. I don't have a very high opinion of most of the professional gunsmiths, gunsmithing schools, and the guys that come out of them and say, and it's not that I don't have respect for the guys that are trying to come out with this education and do it, and it's not that I don't have respect for these military personnel that are coming out and that's what they choose as a career path, to use their GI Bill. But you don't come out with the knowledge that you need to play in the real world here with the old-time gunsmiths. I was watching a video this morning about an old boy that was talking, and he was a whole lot more crotchety than I was, and I didn't agree with part of what he said, but he kind of knew what he was talking about, and he was very knowledgeable about some things. Now, the way he presented it, that he was the end-all, be-all, I definitely don't agree with. I still learn stuff every day. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm fairly knowledgeable. I'm fairly competent at what I do, but I don't know it all. And his is kind of the same attitude that transfers down. You get some new kid that comes out and they're going to set the world afire, and they're telling you that you got to do it this way or you got to do it that way, and you don't need this tool to do it, or you can do it that, or I've developed the latest and greatest cartridge that's better than anything else. No, you're not. You haven't invented anything new. You're not doing it. The idea that they'll tell you that, well, you can come out and you can do work for law enforcement and military. No, you really can't. Military is going to have their own armors. Chances are you're not even going to see them. Law enforcement, over the years, I've done some for law enforcement. I've done a few small things for ATF. I've done a few things for our local police departments and some of our, local county sheriffs and stuff over the years. It's very limited to what it does. One of the departments has a tactical team here that for a year or so I did maintenance on their tactical rifles, on their bolt guns. The reality is there's someone in there that is going to say, why are we paying that? We can do that in-house. And they can. And you say, well, we're going to be able to service their service weapons. No, you're not. They're going to have bought service weapons either as a group from some manufacturer, whether it's Glock, whether it's SIG, whether it's Smith & Wesson, doesn't matter who it is. And you'll see that when you look, and there's a lot of these trade-in guns that have been law enforcement trade-ins. What happens is that manufacturer, and Glock was probably one of the first ones that did that. Yeah, they were probably one of the first ones, and I was involved in that in Glocks when they were doing that. Glock offers a armor's course for those departments. So you'll have 2 or 3 guys go through, and Smith & Wesson and the rest of them do the same thing. They will offer a armor's course for whatever firearm they've provided for this department. Now, and I'm a Glock armorer. I've got a couple of Glock armor certificates, but nonetheless, they go through those armor's courses. They're paid for by the department. Any standard maintenance that needs to be done, any upgrades, anything like that, they've learned in that armor's course. So they're doing that all internally within that department. And that's part of the agreement with Glock. And at the end of 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever the case may be that's set up, why the firearms that they've been carrying as duty weapons are traded back in, and that manufacturer will replace those with the brand new model. So you're not getting that work, So anyway, that's my spiel. This has gone on way too long. I'm not going to edit this. I'm going to load it up just the way it is, because I think it illustrates, for the most part, my feelings of it. There's a lot of things to go with this. There's a lot of things that I will add or go back over again as I add different, videos to this series, and they'll be whenever I get around to doing one and whatever I'm doing. I'd mentioned before my bench is going to be completely redone again, or it's going to be cleaned out and reorganized, and it will be my dedicated gunsmithing bench, because I'm retired and I want one to play with my stuff. Anyway, that's what I got for you. I hope you can gain a little bit of information. I realize this is very negative to the grand illusion of being a great gunsmith. And there's guys that will have their specialized things that they do very well in their area. They've managed to build a loyal clientele, and I've built a very loyal clientele over the years. We've got a couple other guys here in town that are kind of the only games in town, but I still, and they've been around for a few years now, I still hear about, and occasionally we'll see something that they pretty well butchered up, and that's the other thing. You've got to be able to stand behind your work. And when something's not working right, what are you going to do? One of these other guys in town, and I'm still in touch with most of the gun people in this town. And, the trap range, we have a very active group of trap shooters. And there's skeet shooters and things that go along with it, but I'm still kind of tied in with the trap shooters. A lot of times you're dealing with really high-end guns. And we've got one guy out here that's set in the world of fire, and he's been around long enough that you see some of these guys and they manage to continue in spite of themselves. And there was a shooter that had this individual do a little bit of work for him, and he did a couple of projects, and he took another shotgun out to him to have some work done, and it was a relatively high-end shotgun. And I just heard this story here last week, and I know who I heard it from. It's a reliable story. And didn't hear anything back, and when he called to inquire about it, he says, well, I'm sorry, I can't fix it. So he went to pick up his gun, and he'd charged him a $75 inspection fee. That guy will never go back. It's already been made very clear. He will never go back. He's told at least 2 dozen guys, and now I'm repeating the story here on YouTube. You can't do that. When you take in a gun, you take it in with the agreement, unless you specifically say, I'll do what I can. I don't know. My policy has always been, and if I was still in business, would still be, I'll do what I can. If I can't fix it for you, I'm really sorry. Here you go. Here's your gun back. I hope you can find somebody that can fix it, or, if I can find parts or whatever the case may be, then things may change. But there's no charge for that. You stand behind your work. When you took in that gun, you entered a verbal contractual agreement, as far as I'm concerned, that you're going to fix that gun. Once that gun is fixed, you're going to be able to receive payment for that. If you can't fix it, you don't make any money. You don't get paid. So anyway, my spiel. I'm actually tired of talking today. So anyway, comments, suggestions, leave them in the comment section for me below, guys. If you got questions, I'll do my best to answer them. As long as they're reasonable questions and we're all civil about it, but it's the way the world goes. Thanks for taking the time to watch.